Hi, thanks for being with me here today. I have a very special guest. This is my friend Diane Calderon. She is an author, and her book is Living and Loving Life All Day, Every Day. You're going to be amazed at the story behind this. Before we jump into that, I want to say hello to my listeners and watchers in Phoenix, Arizona. You're our southern neighbor here, so it's nice to see. Did you know you are the second city in the world for number of listeners of my show? So thank you so much. Really appreciate the support. I've known Diane for a number of years, and the connection is very easy. She is has been a student and also works with our mutual mentor for mediumship, Suzanne Wilson. I met Diane 5 or 6 years ago in person, but I talked to you. And at that time, I did not know you were training to be a medium. And that's not really the center of what we're talking about today, but I'm going to tell you something that might really surprise you. Her book, Living and Loving Life All Day, Every Day, available on Amazon, is actually got a very tragic story behind it. But I think the center point of this is really the light you shine now and how you've moved forward. So let's backtrack a little bit here and start with where you were at the time that this tragic death happened.
Okay. Where I was at, life was just, bumping along as normal in a sense. Just living my life in rural northern Arizona, have some acreage, taking care of the house, the yard, and taking care of my husband, who was a few years older than I. And he was in the early to mid stages of Lewy Body Dementia. So I was becoming more and more of a full-time caregiver to him during his progression, I guess you would call it, through that disease. Life was getting a little bit challenging as time moved forward, and he needed a little more assistance, a little more help, and was getting a little more lost. Where I live, we didn't have a lot of friends or relatives in the area that I could rely on. I had a son, Matthew, who lived down in Phoenix. Hello, Phoenix, Arizona. And he would come up when he had time, try to come up on weekends if he could, to help me out, give me a little break so I could run to the store. That was my norm of life in early January 2014 before my whole world turned upside down.
And it does happen on a dime, doesn't it? One moment you're living your life and you have this future you're expecting, and then the next moment everything changes. And my heart, I want to tell you, like, this is the second time I've read your book. I was reading it again over the last week just to refresh myself. My heart was just breaking along with yours, reading about your husband. And that had to be hard enough. But then tell us about the last visit you had with your son.
The last visit I had with my son, he had come up to the house. He was here for a few days. He was getting ready to take the building contractor's licensing exam and finally move forward in his mid 30s to be a contractor. He had spent years building homes and doing renovations and things like that, but he was now serious. He wanted to be somebody. So he had been up in the area collecting resumes, getting his paperwork in order. I was helping him out so he could get that business started. The last day he was here was a Saturday. And we had a very long discussion, which was unusual. Usually, when you have an adult son, your discussions are kind of short, brief. Hi, how are you? Yada, yada, yada. But this was a very long discussion, and it centered around some really deep spiritual issues, life issues. It was interesting in that we delved into so many different topics. And looking back over time, it was fascinating some of the subject areas that we had touched upon. But we had this long conversation and we said our goodbyes, and Matthew went on his way. And then my life, went back to caring for my husband. One of the things I remember saying to Matt was my belief children choosing their parents before they come here. I didn't know where I got that from, but I had told him I had truly believed that he chose me and his dad as his parents. And, don't blame us if things didn't always go well because you had a say in who your parents were going to be. Didn't know where I had this idea from. I just had carried it for a long, long time. So off he went. And a few days later, I was expecting him to show up because I was also in the middle of helping my brother who had just been diagnosed with colon cancer. And Matthew was going to come up and spend a couple of days with Sal, his dad, while I took my brother down to Phoenix to get him set up for his surgery. So that was the last day I got to see Matt. He did call me a couple of days later, and we had an interesting discussion that day. Would you like to hear that discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. He called me up. It was oh gosh, what day? It was a Tuesday. And he had said, I'm going to be up here tomorrow, Mom. I was going to try to do it today, but I'm going to go to a conference tonight. But I'll be up tomorrow and looking for a job. I want to get something part-time down here so I will have some money coming in and then focus on the contractor's license. And can you help me with the resume? And as usual, as moms do, I gave him some advice on what to fill out on this basic little application. And I shared with him a story about something that had happened that morning with his dad, who had gotten up and was a little bit lost and had gotten stuck in a bed rail and was calling out for help. And I had walked in to see him, and he was in a very interesting position, and it was kind of funny, but sad too. I had to extricate him from his predicament, and we had a good laugh about that. And just kind of closed the conversation with, well, Mom, I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. Hang in there, and hung up. So that was my last conversation with my son.
And I know you said you really didn't feel any kind of premonition that he was going to die, but before you even got the call, something happened that just touched my heart. I've been thinking about it a lot. It's absolutely astounding. I know my listeners would love to hear about that.
It was a Tuesday morning. I had gotten up pretty early and felt pretty good about the day. And I got my husband up and got him at the table and got his little breakfast going. And my general habit at the time was to jump in the car and drive down to the highway. I live about 3/4 of a mile from the road. That's where they would deliver the morning paper. So it's a cold January morning. I'm heading down the road to get the paper. And as I'm driving, I noticed a flock of bluebirds. And these bluebirds were following along with the car. And what struck me as really odd is that I had never seen bluebirds in our area. I'm in northern central Arizona, but bluebirds tend to be in the higher elevations where there's pine trees and the spruces, not so much where I am, which is more juniper grassland. So it struck me as interesting that there's this flock of bluebirds and they're following me in the car. And then as your mind wanders, I began to think about my son when he was very little and how he used to sing Mr. Bluebird on my shoulder, zippity doo dah. And that memory kind of made me feel pretty happy. And I thought, well, that's kind of cute. To feel Matthew's presence at that moment was really sweet. So I drove on down, got the newspaper. I'm heading back. The bluebirds were there for a little bit, and I got back home and just had a nice memory about Matt when he was young and those days when he was so innocent and so cute. So that's what I felt as I was driving along that road, was the presence of Matt because of these bluebirds.
Isn't it interesting how often birds are a part of afterlife communications? I've experienced it. So many of my clients have. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of bluebirds, I live in the same general area you do. And right after my sister passed, I had my first bluebird on my property. I'd never seen one before, and I love birds, so I'm always watching for them. That bird was there for weeks, never seen again since then.
Isn't that amazing? It's just fascinating.
It is. And then you had another even more powerful experience that you didn't connect with your son until later, rightfully so, given what all happened and
Mhm.
the stress and shock of it all. Can you talk about that?
Just to let people know that that Tuesday morning was a beautiful morning. I got a call about the tragic accident that Matthew had been in the night before. Now, that evening, after I'd gotten that call and, tried to get my wits together, had made phone calls to so many people, I was sitting there at the table. Sal had gone to bed, and I was thinking about Matthew and like, oh my God, I had talked to you the other day about, hey, if one of us should die, the other one needs to send a sign. You didn't send me a sign. And then boom, it hit me what had happened the night before. So on Monday night, the night before tragedy struck, as far as I know, Monday night. I might be getting my days mixed up, but the night before I heard that he had died, I was sitting and watching television with my husband. There was a program that was coming on and it was a little slow getting started. And I was kind of antsy. I looked towards the television and suddenly in front of my face, I saw a ball of sparkling lights. And they look like sparklers from the 4th of July from when I was a kid. I remember that. Just beautiful little lights, not far from my face. I could almost reach out and touch them. And they sparkled for a few seconds. And I thought, wow, what's that? And they went out and I looked over at my husband and I wondered, did you see that? Well, he's focused on the TV. The lights appeared in front of him. He did not see them. I did. I could see them sparkling in front of him. Again, about as far as a hand's length or arm's length. They sparkled and I'm looking and they go out. So I look straight ahead and I'm thinking, okay, I guess I'm seeing things. Sal didn't see them. I saw them twice and boom, they showed up again. And these lights sparkled again in front of my face. Then they moved to my left and they glided over and I followed, I tracked them and they hovered over a little coffee table and disappeared. So I'm looking at them and then they're gone and I'm thinking, yeah, I guess I'm losing it. And I noticed below they had disappeared on the coffee table was a book. And like a dog seeing a squirrel, I go, oh, book, that's where I got that idea I was telling Matthew about the other day, about how children choose their parents. I know it came from that book. Mind you, it was a book that I hadn't looked at in, I don't know, years and years and years. I had not read that book. Somehow it was sitting on my coffee table. Sal maybe had picked it up, dropped it there. I don't know. I pick up the book. It was Edgar Cayce, There is a River. So I'm eagerly holding this book and I'm thinking, oh, Matthew's coming up tomorrow. I am going to show him this is where I had that idea about the kids choosing their parents. I know it's in this book. Let me find it. I open the book right to the page. I mean, right there. And there's a little description about Cayce talking about as souls, we're over on the other side, we're making our plans to come down and live an earthly life, and we have some choices and some options on what we're going to do. And one of those is what family unit we would like to be in, who are our parents going to be. And so I find that and I'm reading it. I forgot about what's on TV. I don't care what they're talking about. I'm reading this book and I'm excited because, hey, tomorrow Matthew's coming up and I'm going to show him this book. We had talked a little bit about other spiritual books. He had started reading things. Maybe he'd like to read this one. So that was pretty amazing. So here I am 24 hours later, the day where I'd gotten this tragic call. And in my mind, I had thought, oh, Matt, you didn't send me a sign. And it was like, boom, yes, you did. There were those lights. And the lights had occurred at about 7 p.m. I know that because of the program that was going on TV. And when the detectives had called me to tell me what had happened to Matt, I asked about what time did this occur, what he had been crossing a road, he got hit by a car and he died pretty quickly and probably instantly. They said it was at about 7 p.m. So the timing of his passing over and the timing of those lights were the same and exact. I knew that that was Matthew saying, hello, I'm fine. This is my energy. And hey, mom, don't worry. Things are going to be okay. And it just carried me, that emotion and that understanding, that belief that he was fine. He's doing okay over in heaven and I can do okay here. Help me make it through the next few weeks, days, months. I mean, there was a lot that I had to take care of. It was a shock, but it helped me move forward through losing him and handling everything I needed to handle at that time.
Him appearing like that really speaks to the strength of his spirit. And it's part of the reason why I, as a medium, do not follow that rule. You have to wait till a year after someone passes. I have found that there's some spirits like your son Matthew who are perfectly able to come through and let you know what they need to let you know. It could even be the day after they pass. Think that there's spirits who are strong enough to do it. And I love that he gave you this gift, and I love how he tried to let Sal know he was there. And I know his his dementia made that difficult, but he was there and you saw that, and then drawing your attention to the book. So I have to ask you, was there anything else you found in that book that you think Matthew wanted to direct your attention to remind you of something?
You know, outside of, the children choosing their parents, and I think the other part of it was that one of the things I had talked about in that discussion Saturday was this idea that I had also had, and I now know it tied in with Edgar Cayce, is that we come into this life with some kind of an idea of what we want to do, a purpose, but we are not to be aware of this when we enter these little bodies. And we have to traverse life. So we come in at one point, we're going to end at another point. In between, picture a map that you're looking at the beginning, and on that map, there's various routes that can be taken to get from entry to exit. And as we bounce along in life, we make our decisions, we make our choices. We might have a route that goes left, one might go right, one might go straight, one might go curlicue, who knows? But somehow we eventually make it to the end. And at the end, we maybe didn't meet every expectation or goal that we had laid out for ourselves. We had taken a different turn, we'd made a few bad choices, we'd made a few good choices. But at the end, we leave this life having accomplished something better. And then maybe we do this again another time and we try to accomplish those things that we missed on that last life or a previous life. And I think that's another important element I got from that book is that feeling that Matthew came in and he chose me as his mom. And I think I was a pretty good mom. I wasn't perfect, but I think I did guide him a lot. His dad guided him a lot. It helped him form where he went in life. He made a few bad choices. There were times I was like, oh my God, is this really my kid? You're kidding me. But there were other times I was so proud of him. But he made his choices. And at the end, he left because I think he had finished whatever it was he needed to do in this life. He was finished. Now he was on the other side and he had another project in mind, which became clear in a short period of time. And that was something that had come through mediums, because I did get involved with having medium readings and eventually learning mediumship, that Matthew would often come in and say, one of the reasons I left was to let my friends know that life is short. Live every day as if it was your last, because you just never know. And in light with that, let me just carry this forward a little bit. As I said, Matthew, on that last day that I had talked to him, had asked for some help on a job application, and I gave him my advice. A few days after he passed, I've collected a lot of the things from his house. I'm going through papers, and there was that job application he had filled out. He hadn't turned it in that day. And on the application, the qualifications section for this job, which was just basically to help out at a restaurant and learn how to be a brewer of beer, the qualifications of the job was living and loving life all day, every day. This is what he wrote as why he should have this job. And this is the theme that carried forward from Matthew, from some of the contacts I've had through mediums, to let his friends know, live and love life every day, because it's what you have right now. And at the end of it, you can look back and be happy. But I think that's just a remarkable focus that he had and continues to have. He nudged me to write this book because he wanted this story out there to let people know that one never dies and that your spirit loved ones are around you. They're sending you signs and they want you to be happy. They want you to live and love life. And they understand if you have a hard time and you have the grief and you have the suffering, but they're really excited when you can learn from it, when you can move forward, when you can help others. And so the book hopefully is going to help others. I know Matthew's excited every time somebody picks up this book and reads it.
Hey, if you're guided to do something by a spirit on the other side that loves you, by an angel, by a guide, it's part of your journey and it's definitely going to help people. I have to tell you, Diane, when I first saw what the name of your book was, I'm like, that is very interesting. And I thought maybe it was about all the travels you're doing overseas and how you're just really kind of like seizing life, but maybe it's partially that too. But then when I reread that part about that it was in your son's job application. I had a good laugh at that, and it makes sense. And I love this message because, like you say at the bottom of the book, there's taglines: a mother's story of loss, love, and connecting with the afterlife. When you know that your loved ones made it to the other side and they're radiantly joyful enough to give you sparkly blue balls of light and direct you to a book, it doesn't take the grief away, but it does help the healing process. I have that with my sister. She's done some pretty amazing things since she passed a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
And luckily, I have not had the tragedy that you have had. That is, I think, the hardest thing to go through. But connecting with your child on the other side is such a huge desire of many people I talk with, and I'm sure people you talk with. What would you say to them if somebody's in that position and they're grieving the loss of a child right now?
My general idea on the grieving of a child is that, yeah, it's a tragedy. It's something that nobody wants to go through. It is the hardest loss I have had, and I've lost pretty much everybody. Husband's parents, a stepson I lost, but my own son has been the hardest to deal with, and the grief is overwhelming at times. But understanding that life doesn't really end, that their love is always surrounding us, helps ease some of the grief. Grief never goes away. It's always there. It's going to be with me until I die, but it's moderated at times. It helps to know when I get a little emotional, when a song comes on or a memory comes across in a photo maybe that pops up, I get a little, what's the word, verklempt, you just feel the emotion. I also can pull back and say, yeah, that was hard, but that was a great memory. That was a great feeling. It was a great connection to have with my son. And I will always carry that. I will always have that. But I know that at some point I'll get to go over there where he is, and we'll have a great reunion. We'll have a great party. And that helps alleviate a little bit of the grief. But anyone who's going through this loss, grieve in your own way. Do not let someone tell you what you need to do or how to grieve. Or I hear these horror things where people say, well, just get over it already. I mean, no, don't ever get over the grief, because it is what you have that connects you with your child or whoever that loved one is that you have a connection with. Embrace it. Take it in as a treasured friend, because it is part of our human process to go through. I don't think there's very many humans out there who will not be touched by grief on various levels. So just embrace it and know that it's temporary. It's only while we're in this physical body that grief will be with us. When we cross over, guess what? Grief goes out the window and we're going to be fine. So that would be just kind of my advice. Like I said, you don't have to listen to anybody, but if it gives you any consolation or comfort to know that grief is okay, process it the way you want, and hopefully you'll find a way to alleviate it just a little bit, enough to know that, hey, we're humans, we're going to deal with this, we're emotional people, but we're going to be fine at some point. Everything's going to be okay, probably over on the other side.
I've talked about this on this podcast before, but a lesson to me way before I became a medium or did my spiritual work full time was when my daughter's father, who was my first husband, passed away. And that was a long time ago, like 95. And I wasn't in love with him. I was remarried, but it was my first real love. It was my daughter's father, and I fell apart. I grieved hard for 4.5 years. And I think back on that. It's a good lesson, because if I can grieve that hard for somebody I'm not in love with, but we were, then I have extreme compassion for people who have lost somebody that they're very deeply in love with or love so much. It's just a whole different ballgame, and you don't know how long it's going to last. You just have to ride it, I think, makes it go faster.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, I love seeing Matthew's picture in the background there. It's like he's there. I see him over your left shoulder, for me, your left shoulder, and it's like he's here in the room with us.
Oh, he is around all the time. A few days, his girlfriend has become very close to me, and she's up here visiting me right now. And we were in the kitchen fixing something. And one of the stories I tell in the book is how he plays with the ceiling fans. I have a ceiling fan in there that he had installed in the kitchen, and it was getting kind of hot. And she says, "Well, turn it on." And I turned the switch on, and I said, "All I can get is the light. The blades need to be run by a remote control." "Well, isn't there another way?" I said, "No, only through the remote control, and the battery's dead." "Well, try it." And I'm trying it. And I said, "See, it's dead." "Well, get a new battery in there." So I pop open the remote, pull out the battery. It's a little tiny, tiny battery. It's not one I would have had. It's not a regular AAA. So I put it in my pocket as a reminder that when I go into town the next time, get a replacement battery. Set the remote control down on the counter. So of course we don't get any fan blades to cool us down a little bit. A little bit later, we're sitting in the living room, and I happen to glance into the kitchen, and that fan blade is running. And I said to her, "Hey, Alex, look, look." And she says, "Oh my God, it's running." "Well, maybe the battery was good." And I said, "No, no, it's right here. It was in my pocket. It doesn't have a battery." And she goes, "Okay, all right, Matt, we got you." I know that he was doing that. He was just showing off, like, "Hey, look, I'll turn it on. Ha, ha, ha." So he's still around. He's always around. We feel him. One of the dogs was barking at something in the kitchen a couple of nights ago, and I felt a presence, and that dog jumped up and barked and went in there looking around. And it's a young dog, it doesn't know Matthew, but I think somebody was hanging out in that kitchen, probably him, because I'm remodeling the kitchen. He's probably looking it over saying, is this right? Is this what you want to do? So he's always around
They are.
over my shoulder.
They absolutely, yeah, they absolutely are. And I've come to a realization that death, as society primarily believes in it, does not exist. It's really just going to another dimension. And they're so close to us. It's like they're behind this little sheer curtain, and we can think about them, talk about them, and boom, here they are. It's very comforting. And at this point in life, at this age, I've had a lot of people who've crossed, especially in the last 5 years. And it seems to be prevalent. There's just a lot of people crossing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you something, because you and I are friends on Facebook and I follow your travels. And I wondered if the traveling you're doing is influenced by Matt and your experiences with him in any way.
I definitely think that they are. Matthew loved to travel. He got around a lot in his younger years and as a young adult. He worked in various states, and he did a lot of things. He was a river raft guide. He worked at a gold mine. He built a solarium, and all outside of Arizona. He loved to travel. And Matthew, being raised as our son, was exposed to a lot of things. We went down to Mexico. We drove all the way to Oaxaca. We did a lot with him. He knew that I had an interest in Egypt, and I have a set of DVDs he got me for Christmas one year that were all about Egypt. An opportunity came up about a year ago to go to Egypt, and it was a sacred journey, one with a well-known, established person out there who is into the more sacred ideas of the ancient sites, as opposed to the historians who have their own boring ideas of how old the pyramids are, the Sphinx, or whatever. So I signed up, and I got to go to Egypt. And I knew Matthew and Sal were both with me all along the way and encouraging me, and just excited that I am experiencing Egypt. They could feel the trip through my emotions, through my eyes, in a sense. And I felt them around me. I had a point where we were allowed to be at the base of the Sphinx, which most tour groups don't get to do. But this particular one, we had permission to go down there and spend about an hour. And when I touched that Sphinx, I had a rush of emotions, feeling both Matthew and Sal with me, as if here we are. I am at this Sphinx, guys. And they're like, "Oh, we're so excited to be here with you." So yeah, I know that Matthew, Sal, both are encouraging me and pushing me to go out and do more and experience the world. I want to go to the places that I feel drawn to and that they were both interested in. A highlight might be Machu Picchu. I don't know if I'll be in shape for that, but that's another place that we had talked about someday going to. So who knows what will be in my future.
Well, I love that you're doing that. I'm living vicariously through you till I go on my next trip, which is coming up. Any other changes you've noticed within yourself or within your life through this experience, Diane?
A number of changes. When you're younger, you have a little bit of a fear of death and the unknown, and a little bit of trepidation about things of a spiritual nature that aren't religious. I was raised very Catholic, but when you mediums and the idea of mediumship and talking to the dead, I was a bit nervous about that. Matthew's death and his showing the lights and my understanding that he's around really pushed me into a different way of looking at the world, at life, and at death. I began to read about mediums. I wanted to know a little bit about why did Matthew get into the predicament that he was in? It was a hit and run. How was it you were in the street? I found an answer through mediumship. I had a medium reading a few months after he died, and it came through pretty clear what had happened, why he passed over. That just propelled me to want to know more, learn more. I took workshops, classes, ended up working with Suzanne Wilson, her client services manager, and she nudged me to take her classes. And in time, I learned how to do mediumship myself. It's not something I'm practicing right now, but I've done it and I know what it's like from the sides of being a sitter and the sides of being the medium. And someday, I guess, maybe I'll know what it's like to be the spirit person making the communication. But it's really changed me. I am not afraid of death. I am not that religious. I'm much more spiritual. I'm aware that everybody is going to be fine when they pass over. And if we've made some mistakes, we'll kind of beat ourselves up over it. But it's not the idea of I'm going to be punished for something I might have done wrong. It makes me feel pretty comfortable now that I'm okay. And when I get over on the other side, I'll go over whatever lessons I needed to learn and I'll be all right. And I think all of us will be all right when we get over there. There's a greater source than us, a greater power. And we just honor that and we learn to live and love life and love, because the root of it all is just love. And so yeah, I have changed quite. It's been over 10 years since Matthew died, and I'm not the person I was before this happened.
You're really shining a lot of light today. I hope you know that.
Thank you.
I really see it. I just love to see that joy in your eyes.
Well, I get excited. I really do. Before Matt passed, life was looking a bit gloomy. It really was, with my husband declining and worries about, well, how am I going to survive economically? Because we were both retired. And so your income is a little bit limited. And when Matthew was talking about, well, I'll be a building contractor, there was this glimmer of hope that, well, I can help you do the administrative paperwork stuff. I'm pretty good at that. And it would give me something to do, maybe a little extra income. And then Matt passed, and that went out the window. And then in time, Sal passed, and I was a bit lost. I didn't know where I was going to go. I had changed in my outlook on, like I said, religion and spirituality. I was growing to believe in things. And one of the things that I learned is just trust things are going to be okay. Things are going to work out. Don't worry so much. And once I put my trust over into the higher powers, things have worked out quite well. And I don't worry anymore about that. Yeah, I'm going to watch my budget, but no, I'm not worried. I'm doing okay. So I don't know. It's just an amazing change has occurred in the 10 and a half years since Matthew passed over. And it was all due to his spirit being so lively and loving and being right there for me along the way. He hasn't left me, and he's been around. He helped me through Sal's period of dementia. Matthew showed up a lot with Sal. And as Sal was getting progressively worse and didn't know who I was, he could still relate stories about, oh, Matthew was here. He told me that he's going to help me when I die. He's learning how to help people transition. So he's going to be there for me. I mean, I'd hear this from
Wow.
Sal, and I had no doubt that Matthew was there helping Sal. Oh, yeah, that's awesome. I wish he was talking to me that clearly, but Sal and him were having conversations, and that really helped me a lot through that process and through Sal's transition over to the other side.
Well, let's face it, Sal was already at a point where he was often not quite in this dimension. So it
Yeah.
does make it easier for spirit to talk to him very clearly. Not an unusual thing. I got to tell you too, reading your book, I don't know if it's because I'm an empath or an intuitive or what, but I was picking up so strongly and such a warm feeling of how close and loving your family is. And I'm going to say is because they're still with you. Like I could feel the mother-son love and the husband-wife love and the whole family love. And it just comes through so beautifully. And I want to show this book one more time here, Living and Loving Life All Day, Every Day. And it's by Diane Calderon. And I will put the name of the book in the show notes too, in case, because that's a long name. You might not get it exactly right or her name exactly right. I want to help you find it because it's a very good read. And if you're grieving, it doesn't have to be but if you're grieving at all, I think this book is really going to help you a lot through that process of understanding what's happening, recovering, and connecting with your loved one on the other side. You do not have to be a medium to connect with your own loved ones on the other side. Diane, thank you so much for being on podcast today. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you so much, Ivory. I really appreciate this opportunity to share Matthew's story and my story of progression and change and working through the grief. And thank you for mentioning my book. I would like to just plug it in a little bit. It is available on Amazon.com in Kindle and paperback version. And if you want a little more information on myself and see a little bit of the background of Matthew and our lives and some of the other things I've done, I have a website, DianeCalderon.com. So you can go and check out my website. So I much appreciate that.
And
Thank
that
you.
website's also in the show notes. So you'll be able to find it there too. Because I know lots of people are driving or working and doing things. They don't have a chance to jot that down. So it'll all be, that contact info will be in the show notes, whether you're watching or listening. So you can check on it there. And again, Diane, thank you so much. And I hope I get the pleasure of seeing you in person soon.
I hope so. When it cools down a little, because it's so hot, I don't want to go outside right now.
No, me
Ay.
either. Me either. It was 115 in my car as I was driving around here
Ooh.
yesterday. So
Ooh.
just really quick, tune in next week. The topic is clues to your past lives. And in the meantime, may your angels surround you. May your angels protect you every moment, every day of your life. I'll see you next week.